Oh no. This is going to be boring. Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop. I've had a lot of questions recently about auger bits. Where do you get them? How do you sharpen them? What are you looking for when you're actually out getting them? And I kind of want to touch on some of those items, particularly where I get them and what I'm looking for. So let's actually jump into auger bits. I know it's a little boring, but oh well. So first off, let's actually address where I find auger bits. Most of my auger bits I have purchased one at a time, or I'll get a box lot of a dozen or so and really only want 2 or 3 out of the box lot. I find them at antique stores, I find them at tool resale stores. Occasionally I'll find them at estate sales. Rarely do I find them at garage sales. You just find them every now and then here and there, but usually you're going to find like a bucket of auger bits and you're going to dig through it and you're going to find, you know, 3 or 4 that are any decent. Most resale stores, most of the tool resale stores like Retool, you're going to find a bucket of them in the back along with the files. And you're going to spend your time actually going through them and looking for what you're particularly interested in. And usually I'm going to have a full set, the 1/4 inch through 1 inch. And occasionally I have a couple of them in here that I'm not completely happy with, that I'm still looking for ones that are similar. But eventually I'm going to have a nice clean set. And eventually I would like to get all one type or all one manufacturer, but until then you got to live with what you got. And they're not easy to find exactly what you're looking for. You got to do a lot of hunt and peck. But if you spend your time, you're going to occasionally come across them. Another place where I will often get auger bits is at the Midwest Tool Collectors Association. You've heard me talk about them a lot. Midwest Tool Collectors, they're predominantly in the Midwest, but there's a lot on the East Coast, and we're trying to get more into like Texas and out on the West Coast. So that is a great place for looking for them. Occasionally I'll come off entire sets that are basically brand new. You're going to spend a pretty penny for them, but they're decent quality things that are going to last you for a lifetime if you take care of them. As to new, I do not know of any manufacturer making auger bits for braces that I trust. Really, I haven't come across any. Irwin still makes them, but everything I have read and seen from them, they are trash. I've heard about them being completely off-center, to the screw being off-center, to the shafts being twisted. They're just not up to quality of what older Irwin bits actually were. So yes, you can go buy a full set of brand new Irwin bits, but I wouldn't. I just haven't heard anything good about them. So yeah, that takes us to antiques and a little bit more of a hunt and peck to try and find them. So let's actually take a look at some of the particulars and what you're looking for when you actually find them and you want to know, is it any good? So let's take a look at the actual auger bit and see some of the parts. The first thing we have is the lead screw here. This is what pulls it forward into the work. You'll hear it called a pigtail or other things. I'm just going to call it a lead screw here because this is actually the powerhouse. This is what pulls the auger through the work. You shouldn't be putting a lot of force into the auger because it should pull itself through the work and do most of the work for you. The next thing to touch the work after the lead screw are the Knickers or spurs. They're these little plates that stick out on either side. And these are what make this so much better than most modern drill bits. These Knickers or spurs are going to be the first thing that actually cuts the circle. And so these will stick out before the blade, and they'll cut all the fibers so you get a really nice clean entry point and exit point. Then you have your cutters. This is the actual cutting blade, and there's 2 on this one that then will slowly cut out spirals of work. After that, then you have the flutes that remove the detritus from the work. Most have just a single spiral, and you'll see that the second cutter just stops short, but some still do come with the double spiral. Some people like the double spiral. I actually prefer the single spiral. I find it removes material a little bit easier, but everyone's a little bit different. You might like the double spiral. You never know until you give it a try. Now, another thing to look at when picking up an auger bit is How aggressive is the lead screw? Now this one you can see has a very, very fine thread. This will pull through the work slowly. The chips coming out will be thinner. This is great for your hardwoods, the things that are more difficult to pull through. It will cut slower, it will take more time, but this will give you an easier time in the hardwoods. Whereas for your softwoods and things you just want to quickly bore through, a coarse thread through it like this is fantastic. It allows you to really munch through the wood and go fairly quickly. Now, when you pick up a lead screw, not only are you going to be choosing do you want coarse or fine thread, then one of the most important things is the actual tip of the lead screw. And here you can see how this one is kind of dull. Someone has tried to resharpen the very tip of this, but you can see how it kind of gets flat at the end when you compare it to one of these that is actually pointed all the way to the end. And what happened is at some point, the very tip of this broke off. And so someone has come and filed it back in and tried to put it back in. But that will never suit you as well as a good tip. Honestly, once the tip is broken off on them, they're pretty much junk. Yes, you can spend the time to refile them and they can work, but I generally just set them aside and get a different one. I really don't want to be wasting my time on the lead screw because it's a pain once you start getting it. It's not pulling itself to work. You have to put force into it. So be aware of the tips on the lead screw. Get ones that are nice and sharp and pointy, and you will be very, very happy. So now let's look at the knickers or wings or spurs. Really the second most important thing about the auger bit. After pulling it through the wood, these cut the circle that give you a nice clean hole all the way through. Now you're going to want these sharp, and you're going to want to be making sure that several things aren't wrong with them. Here are a couple examples of bad knickers. These are things you're probably going to see fairly often. This one, they've been flared out. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. You can probably see it right there, how it's sticking out wider. That's going to cut a larger circle, but in this case, they've been mushroomed over. Apparently someone has hit it with a hammer or something of that nature, and that wing is actually bent out of shape. That is going to cause you all sorts of issues, and basically, unless you want to take this back to the forge and reshape it, this is pretty much trash. The other thing you're probably going to see the most common is when the knickers aren't tall enough to cover the main cutting edge. And in this case, yes, there is a knicker there. You can still see that knicker, but it is not high enough to actually cut the hole before the main blade enters the wood. And you can look at it, if you look down it from the blade, you can see here how the blade is up higher than the knicker back here. And so when you're looking through them, you want to make sure that the knicker still has a lot of life on them. If the blades are well used and taken care of, usually the first thing to die is that knicker. Over time with sharpening, they tend to wear out and fall off. So you're going to be wanting to keep an eye on that knicker. The next thing you're going to want to be aware of is the main cutter here. You can see this one is in pretty bad shape. I don't know if you can see it here, but there are a bunch of nicks right along the edge of the cutter. Let me see if I can get a better image of that. Yeah, here you can see all of the nicks along the very edge of the cutter. Now I can sharpen those and bring it back into shape, but it's going to take a lot of work. And if I am looking for one particular size that I can't get a hold of, this one might be worth going back to. It still has a lot of life left in the knicker. The knicker, you can see here how it's sticking up a good deal higher than the cutting blade, but the blade still needs a good chunk of work in order to get it sharp. The next thing you're going to want to look at and make sure that the shaft is good and straight. And usually you can eyeball down the shaft and just make sure that it is looking straight and that you can see that there aren't any bends or kinks in it. That occasionally happens, and if it falls off a bench or is hit, just keep an eye on that. If you've ever used one that's bent, you will know it's wobbling all over the place. So when out looking for an auger, you're going to notice on the bottom of them, they're usually stamped with a number, 14, 15, 16, so on. What that is actually the number of sixteenths. So if you have a 16 on the bottom, that means it's 1 inch. It has 16 sixteenths. If it's an 8, that means it's a ½ inch. And so you can actually buy augers by the 16th of an inch just looking at the number. And so if you ever talk about someone with a number 10 auger bit, that's 10 sixteenths of an inch. So it's a fairly simple, nice system. Usually they go from 1/4 inch to 1 inch, but occasionally you'll find some other weird sizes. Also, speaking about size, you can also get these adjustable wing augers. They basically do the same thing, but you can move the blade in and out. These can often be a pain. They are hard to set up, and they tend to be a little less accurate because the blade has a little bit of play in it often. In this case, someone in the past has taken a longer one like this and hacked off a small piece on here. Usually the only time I'm going to use these auger blades is if I'm cutting a hole that is greater than 1 inch, or something that needs to be more specific than a 1/16 of an inch. Usually it's just for some big screw, like on a leg screw, where I need to cut a 2 or 3 inch size hole. I'll grab one of these. If I don't, then I'm going to grab a hole saw. So what makes a modern auger different from a traditional auger? Well, one of the big things that you're often going to see on modern augers is they have these large flat sides. And these are great for giving yourself a nice, smooth, clean hole. They're going to leave the inside of the hole really nice. They almost burnish the surface. They also allow it to run a little bit straighter. The problem with them is they create a lot of friction. They become very, very hard to push through the wood. So if you're using a hand brace, this can be a lot of work to push through the wood. Also, if you're working with a drill, then you're not caring as much about the power, because then the drill kind of does the work for you. So that's why a lot of the traditional ones have a very thin flute that actually touches the wall. It leaves the inside surface a little bit more rough, but it makes it far easier to push through the work. That's one of the reasons why I love the single spiral auger bit. It even has less friction than a double spiral, and far, far less friction than a modern auger designed for a drill. So how exactly do you go about sharpening an auger bit? Now this is an auger file. It has the serrations on the face here, but not on the edge. They are smooth. And then on the other end, the serrations are on the face, or on the edge, but not on the face. It is safe. And this way you can actually get right up against a side and still be able to grind off the edge without grinding anything on the side. Makes it a little bit easier for that. On an auger bit, there's two places where you're going to want to sharpen. Number one, you want to sharpen underneath the main cutter. And usually it doesn't take much at all. I just go at it like this until I get a smoother, slightly shinier surface. And I'm grinding my way across the cutter. And I don't know if you can see it, but I can see how that surface has gotten a little bit more shiny. See if you can see it right there. And that just lets me know that's fairly well sharpened. I can then just feel it with my finger. I'm not looking for anything that's razor sharp. I'm just looking for something that feels relatively sharp and smooth. I don't want any nicks or cuts. Might run my nail along it and make sure I don't feel anything there. The second thing you want to sharpen is the nicker. Now, do not sharpen the outside of the radius. If you sharpen the outside of the radius, what you're going to end up doing is actually making this smaller. And so it'll cut a small hole, and then all of these flutes come in and jam up in the hole. So don't ever touch the outside of the nicker. You just want to touch the inside. So I'm going to set this right here. And same thing before. I'm just going to sharpen this nicker right here. And so this is what ends up killing more auger bits than anything else, is that eventually over time you've sharpened this nicker so much that there's no material left. And just as before, I'm looking for something that's relatively sharp. Nothing that's like razor sharp. I still want to be able to put my finger on there. But if you want to go razor sharp, go for it. I do know some people who use diamond plates to actually clean those. But an auger file like this actually works pretty well. I'll leave a link to one of these down below so you can actually see it. So a lot of information on augers. I know there's far more out there I could put into it. I'm sorry I have to cut the videos at some point. If you have any questions, let me know and I would be glad to answer those. I regularly have people asking me questions. I love to answer them. If you want to find out about the auger file, where to get one of those, I'll leave a link to that down below. And yeah, that's about it. This is a kind of a fun topic that some people find great luck finding auger bits and some people really don't. You never know until you actually get out there and you know what you're looking for. So I hope you liked the video. If you did, that is thanks to the patrons on Patreon. You guys are the reason why I can keep putting out videos like this. If you'd like to help out with that or find out more about that, you can do so right down over here. Also, if you'd like to subscribe or see some behind the scenes information, you can do that over here. That's about it for this time, and until next day, have a wonderful day.